Thomas Westbrook is a famous YouTuber who runs the channel Koolaid with almost 100,000 subscribers and over 10 million views. His channel focuses mostly on debunking conspiracy theories and anti-scientific propaganda. Now, what to me makes Thomas different from any other content creator is his fascinating life story. Now, he grew up in Azerbaijan, in the Soviet Union, and he was raised by evangelical parents, so he had a very religious upbringing. Yet somehow he managed to get rid of his religious dogmas and now be an advocate for skepticism and critical thinking. In a rare case that you're still not subscribed to Thomas's channel, I strongly recommend that you do. You'll learn more about his fascinating life and you'll see his great content, especially his debunking of psychics, that I strongly recommend. And now, without any further ado, here is my interview with Thomas Westbrook.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bottoms up.
What are we toasting to?
Let's toast to the flat earthers and all the free entertainment that they find on the internet. I think that's a valid toast, I suppose, even though they spread...
Not to the harm, but to the entertainment value. I'll toast to that.
Yeah, exactly. The harm is another problem. And before we start this interview, I need to ask you, did you fly straight from America to Australia?
Yes.
I know this sounds like a weird question.
Okay.
But there are flat earthers who don't believe there is such straight flight. And Mark Sargent, one of the most famous flat earthers, he actually pointed that out as one of the main arguments against the globe Earth.
Where is he trying to fly from? Is he saying like there's no direct flight from Miami to Australia? Or from anywhere in the US to Australia?
Well, like most of their claims is very vague.
Yeah.
So if you want to try to fly to Australia, it gets extremely complicated. Now I know you're coming from Austin and you didn't have a straight flight.
Well, but so here's the thing with the aviation industry. And I started off in aeronautical engineering, but wound up switching majors. So I'm not an expert in this, but like I've also been on, probably 150 plus flights in the course of my short life. I fly a lot. I travel a lot. And oftentimes there's not a direct flight because you'll have certain networks where certain airlines will service different routes. But if you want to get somewhere that's outside of that route, then they may have partnerships or agreements with other airlines. And it'll be like you're flying under, you're technically flying United, but it's like operated under another airlines or something. And so you might get one number for like your overall flight record locator, and it helps keep your price down because it's all one company that's negotiating the trip, but it's not necessarily all one plane that's owned and by United, for example. So you might have a there may not be a direct route from Austin to Australia that's all one airline, but they may say, oh hey, but there is a flight from San Francisco because we need to refuel, or we a flight from LA because if you're trying to fly from Austin to Australia, that's why would you unnecessarily make a flight longer than it needs to be if you have hub cities that are international?
There might even be demand in Austin.
Well, and Austin's not exactly a big international airport.
Exactly.
There's a very select few international locations that Austin will fly to because it's a small airport. LA's right on the coast. On the other side, you got Miami, you got New York and stuff, Chicago O'Hare that will do massive trips internationally to Europe or Australia or Asia. Those are the ones that you would expect to have a service from, which is exactly what we have. There is a direct flight from LA to Australia. Now, here's where the conspiracy theorists are going to go crazy, is that my flight actually was not direct from LA, it was direct from San Francisco because I had technical difficulties and they had to, I missed my flight. But the technical difficulties weren't in LA. The technical difficulties were when I was in Texas and the flight was delayed, and so when I got to LA, my flight had already left.
You lost a connection.
So there's not a daily flight from LA. There was a flight the next day from San Francisco, so they flew me up there. Here's the thing though. I know I was in the US. I know I was in San Francisco. I'm from California. I've flown over San Francisco. I looked down. I was like, yep, there's the Golden Gate Bridge. I've driven over that bridge. I've rented a car there before. You know, my girlfriend lives up in Northern California, in Sacramento. We've driven from Sacramento to San Francisco. I was like, I know this state. I literally like got off the plane. I was in the airport. And I was like, yes, this is the San Francisco airport. This isn't somewhere, you know, this a replica, duplicate, perfectly, you know, replicated entire city somewhere else. It was, no, I was in San Francisco, hopped on a plane. I was in that plane for a very long time. It was 14 hours, went across the international date line, got to Australia, and was jet lagged.
Now, one question though. Did you sleep during your flight?
Now, here's the thing. I did sleep some, but not everyone on that flight was asleep at the same time. And it was a big plane. There were a lot of people on that plane.
No, they're gonna pick on that point though. That you don't know that everyone was not asleep at the same time. Maybe they put something in your drink or made you sleep. But I actually been on a flight from Sydney to Santiago in Chile. It's a 15-hour flight. I was awake the whole time. I couldn't sleep.
Where you didn't sleep.
I didn't sleep at all. So nobody put me to sleep there and changed the plane or made a U-turn and took me back to South America. That did not happen. And another thing is your flight took about 15 hours. In the flat Earth model, that would be absolutely impossible. You have to cross the entire planet to come from America to Australia.
Well, and here's the other thing too. Is so I listen to audiobooks, and when I start an audiobook, sometimes if I'm on a plane, I'll fall asleep, and when I wake up, I look at the place where the audio is. I'm like, all right, I remember I listened up until this point. I'll back it up and listen. But that's a really good way of tracking
the time.
How long I've been asleep.
Yeah.
So, like, I did doze off for, like, 30 minutes here or there.
Right.
And I pull up my phone, which is locked. My phone, you know, and it's still playing the audio from the audiobook. And it's like, okay, I slept for 30 minutes. You mean to tell me that they landed in some full switcheroo or something in that time period? I don't think so.
But what if they took you to another place? Not Australia, not the Australian continent, but somewhere else.
I mean, you can see out the city. This is a huge city. Melbourne's like almost 5 million people. It's like 4.9 something, I think, last I saw. There's bridges with cars like everywhere. There's parks. There's giant sky rises. There's, you know, signature, you know, giant Ferris wheel with the lights on it and stuff. Like, there's all these buildings that are, you know, you have all these people who speak in an Australian accent. Are they all actors? Because, I mean, I know...
I live here for 5 years.
Yeah, I know a thing or two about acting and about Hollywood. I've got connections. I've got family and stuff. I've got people who, like, you know, have worked in the film industry, who work in entertainment and showbiz and stuff. And let me tell you, aside from, like, a very rare few professionals who sit down and have, like, weeks and weeks and weeks of vocal coaching, most people cannot do a good accent.
Yeah.
If you're not a linguist or you don't have skill training, like, most people are really bad at accents. And so, you know, a great example of that is in Mary Poppins. One of the actors, Dick Van Dyke, we can laugh about his name later, tries to do a Cockney accent. And he talks like this, like the most ridiculous way. And it's just so over the top. It's so bad. It's so awful that, like, British people have been cringing ever since.
The constable is really spongeable. Now how does that sound?
And he was an actor. And he couldn't get it right. And whenever you watch, like, movies, you know, I studied in Russia. I did a study abroad in Nizhny Novgorod. And, you know, I'm an American. I grew up in the former Soviet Union, but I realize my accent's not great in Russian, but I can spot a really bad Russian accent. Now I'm getting somewhere with this. Like, this entire city, people have Australian accents. It is a distinct accent. It is not a British accent.
Yeah.
It's not an Irish or Scottish accent. They have a very distinct Australian accent by the millions. Yeah, there's some immigrants. There's some people, you know, from, you know, China or Thailand or Korea or something who don't have accents.
Yeah.
Or who don't have Australian accents. They have, you know, their native accents and stuff. There's Americans and stuff. You came from Brazil, right?
From Brazil, yeah.
But even still, like, to try to have people replicate that at scale, and they're all actors or they're all actresses and they're all putting on this perfect Australian accent. Like, when I hear a Hollywood Russian accent, I cringe. I can spot it because, like, I've lived there long enough that, like, I hear it and I'm just like, no, that's not how they'll try to read off something, you can tell that they're memorizing a line, they have no idea what they're saying, and they'll just be like, blah, 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 blah. And it just sounds like they're trying to do, like, Call of Duty Russian.
Hey. Yes. I want my board.
So that would be, I think, a good challenge for our flat earther friends in all over the world, in this case specifically in America, to come to Australia. That's a challenge. Come down here. And see for yourself.
Well, and here's the other thing.
Australia exists. We exist.
Here's the other thing. I flew a couple weeks ago. I was speaking at a conference in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Now, if you look on a globe, and I know that's going to make some flat earthers cringe, but if you look on a globe at about how far it is from Austin, Texas to Tel Aviv, and you look at about how far it is from Austin, Texas to Australia, I think it's a little further to Australia, but they're both like 10 to 12,000 miles or something. It's something like that. I forget the exact number. When you go across that many time zones, you jet lag. Like, your brain thinks that you're in a different... Now, and there are flat earth, I won't say models, but it's not a complete model, but that account for jet lag because it's like, the way that it's set up. I understand that.
Yeah.
But, like, I went far enough in one direction and then far enough in another direction that, my body was able to tell that I was in a different time zone. So that works for going in, like, if the Earth is hovering around the pancake, or if the sun is hovering above the pancake Earth, you could account for time zones. What you can't account for is while simultaneously taking into account that I'm jet lagging like crazy because my brain thinks that I'm in a different time zone, I'm also in a different climate.
Yeah.
And we're both literally on the coast at sea level.
Yeah.
In Tel Aviv and here. It's not an altitude thing at all. And yet, when I was up in Texas, when I was up in California, like literally just a few weeks ago, when I was in Tel Aviv, like, it starts getting cold. It's wintertime. It's December right now. I was literally looking at Christmas decorations all up and down here. I didn't just fall asleep and wake up 6 months later. It's right before Christmas. And yet today it was 102 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost like 40 Celsius.
Yeah.
And it's just insanely hot. And you mean to tell me that, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt out here and just, comfortable, or not just comfortable, but sweating. Yeah. And I'm in a different time zone and a different climate. And you can't account for that with a pancake Earth.
And not only that, what time did the sun go down today? And what time did it go?
It was much longer days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Texas, so I went to Tel Aviv, then I came back to Texas, and then I came here. All about 2 weeks total span. In Texas, by 5:30, around 5:30, the sun's already like going down. Like short days. Very short days. Here, and I'm saying by 5:30 p.m. it's setting.
Yeah. Here
it was 9 o'clock and it was still light out. Like 9 p.m. and it's still light out. And in the morning, the sun is like up. It's bright by like 5 something, like 5:30 a.m. or whatever. And in Texas, it's like not getting bright until considerably later in the day.
It's many elements here that makes you conclude that this whole thing about flat Earth is nonsense. And we understand flat Earth is a fringe. Yeah. It's a fringe theory.
Well, and I get that. They'll be like, "Oh, we performed this test and we can account for the same result using this with flat Earth." I'm like, "Okay, cool. That's cool. Like, I want you to test it. I want you to, actually go out and see for yourself. Like, I respect that. But can the flat Earth model also account for all of this other stuff? And the fact is, it can't. No. And they have to appeal to conspiracy. They have to appeal to cover up. They have to appeal to all of the people at NASA are using Photoshop and stuff, and all of the lenses that you have when you do an experiment. It's just a warped fisheye lens, and the ships going over the edge of the horizon is actually it's a weird mirage reflection or something, and it's and all the scientific tests and stuff, and like it's all a lie, and the moon landing's a lie, and NASA's lying, and the government is lying, and all these people. It's like, and why? You see how religious our government is in the U.S.
And the thing is, when many of those are religious, they're gonna say the why is because of some atheist conspiracy to make this really significant. But some of them are not religious.
But my point though is that the vast majority of flat earthers who I've seen put forward this as a conspiracy have said that it's you look in the Bible says that the Earth is flat. And it's an atheist agenda, and it's people, and I'm sure that some of them don't argue that, but for the ones that do, if they say that it's an atheist cover-up, we have evangelical tentacles all throughout our government. It's insane. Trump has an evangelical advisory board. He's deep-throating the religious. And there's no freaking way that Mike and Pence could be president and vice president, and you have all of these religious senators and Republican control of, the Supreme Court and of the, for a while it was both the House and the Senate and stuff, and yet, for some reason, they're going against the Bible. They don't even accept evolution, most of them, because, evolution, which has, oh my God, so much evidence for.
Yeah.
Like, the more that I love science. I love a wide variety of fields. And one of the reasons why I became an atheist, or at least one of the reasons why I left Christianity, or young earth creationism, biblical literalism, was that I started realizing, as I studied so many fields and started learning how we know what we know, evolution is like one of those things that it does not matter what field of science you're exploring. It could be genetics. It could be geology. It could be even astronomy, to get like kind of an age of like the Earth, and seeing how planets form and stuff, and trying to figure out time frames. It could be something like chemistry and using radiometric dating. It could be dendrochronology. It could be anything. Biochemistry. Every single one of these fields confirms evolution. Every single one of them. And yet you have religious people denying that. And yet even the religious politicians denying it, like Mike Pence, Ben Carson, to name a few, Betsy DeVos in the U.S. And you mean to tell me that they won't accept evolution, and yet they're working to cover up the flat Earth, and they're turning a blind eye to it? It makes no sense.
No, and the flat Earth would be the only thing that united the Soviets and Americans during the Cold War, united the Nazis and the Soviets and the Americans. It's the conspiracy that unites everyone.
And everyone has satellites. You look at how many world governments have satellites, as well as independent private companies. It does your head in. It's like they're all in on it. So
I'm bringing this topic of flat Earth because that is a global conspiracy. That's what they claim. And I want to talk a little bit about skepticism and about activism, because you've been traveling. You didn't only come to Australia. You've been traveling the world and going to different conferences. Now, do you believe that we can say that there is a skeptic movement, a global skeptic movement, or do you think there are more
not a united one?
Not a united one.
Not a united one by any stretch. I mean, we joke within the atheist community that herding atheists is like herding cats. And herding, not hurting, but like trying to get them to actually work together and to not go a million different ways, because we pride ourselves on being free thinkers. We pride ourselves on not following groupthink and being, not just one collective, but being independently minded and stuff. And because that's such a core tenet within, especially the skeptic movement, but if you become an atheist through skepticism, then with that as well, saying that there's one global atheist movement, God, we could be a lot more effective if there was, but it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And religious people have the same thing. Like, there are religious people who are pulling strings in government and who are funding and lobbying and stuff. But from the flip side of that, if I were to say that it's one united global conspiracy, thing, it's like, there are incredibly influential political, religious organizations.
Yeah.
But there's also 20,000 different denominations where they're all fighting over every little thing. Like, people are, you know, to assume that people can really be that effective and agree on everything, no.
I don't know. I don't even agree on everything, but one thing that are skeptics, that are involved, I wouldn't say necessarily activists, even though you could say that having a YouTube channel, both you and I, are some form of activism for promoting critical thinking and promoting skepticism. We have certain things that unite us in terms of promoting these ideas of critical thinking, not necessarily atheism.
Yeah.
So isn't it possible that having a global movement or something that we can try to work together from different parts of the world, something that would help us?
You know, I'm not saying that unity is a bad thing. I'm not saying that, you know, having common interests and common goals is a bad thing. I'm just saying that right now that doesn't exist. You're like, okay, what are the biggest atheist and skeptic organizations in the world right now? Like, you're an activist, can you even name, like, what the biggest ones are?
I would say American Atheists.
But that's American, though. That's not international.
Global. Yeah, absolutely. But global, I wouldn't say there isn't one at all in terms of global.
I mean, every once in a while there'll be, like, an international humanist conference or an international atheist conference or something. But, like, in terms of organizations that are international, like, you have Atheist Republic, which is a Facebook group.
Yes.
And you know, I mean, they do more than that. They have different consulates. They have a website. They try to, you know, provide people with resources, but it's kind of, you know, disparate. And there's a lot of different, you know, local groups and stuff, and it's hard to get people to really be involved, boots on the ground. They'll join Facebook groups. They'll join small online communities or big online communities, but to get people to really get off their butts and get involved, it's challenging. And I'm just trying to think of, like, international organizations at all. You have, like, Atheist Alliance International. It's not that big of an organization. CFI is mostly just in the US, the Center for Inquiry. They do skepticism and stuff. But a lot of times there's organizations that used to be a part of. So, like, there was the Skepticon here in Australia. The Australia Skeptics organization is, I think, the second or third largest skeptics organization in the world, and it used to be, and I could be wrong on this, but I was talking to someone at the conference, and he was saying that it used to be affiliated with CFI, but then what they found with the Center for Inquiry was when there was a lawsuit that was happening with one of the subsidiary groups, that CFI didn't want to get roped into all the lawsuits that were, you know, any of the organizations under their umbrella would be affected by, and so they all kind of split off and did their own thing. So even then, it's like, you know, it would be cool to have some form of organization in order to really, you know, get people to, you know, be more active and to come together and to have one big unifying push for something that we care about, that we're passionate about. But I don't see anything like that, and I don't see it happening anytime soon.
You don't see any movement towards that at all?
I see a lot of small movements. I see a ton of small movements. You know, like, we organized the Faithless Forum conference, and we encourage people to take things not on faith but based on evidence. We encourage people to test it, because I say this time and again, truth withstands scrutiny. So we should be able to go out and test and see if something is true or not. That the universe is knowable. We can actually figure it out. And I want to show people the methods that we use to get there. But even the Faithless Forum, it's like, last conference we had 170 people. It was only our second year. This next one we're looking to maybe be 500. Maybe we'll look back and watch this 10 years from now and be like, we had no idea we were going to explode and have tens of thousands of people show up. But, you know, if anything, it's just going to be people who, they're passionate about learning, they feel like it's a community that they belong to, they love science, they want to see human progress, and they're tired of religious dogma. Those are some things that can unite us, but, you know, especially for flat earthers and people who think that there's some type of, like, overall, you know, puppet master or something. It's like, are there rich people who are funding liberal candidates? Yeah. is there a global evil atheist agenda? Not that I'm aware of, and I've been doing this full time for 3 years. I'm one of the larger content creators. You'd think, if so, the reptilians would have reached out to me at some point. I actually Googled how to join the Illuminati just because I thought it'd be a funny video.
Yeah.
And I got, like, literally, it's like the new Nigerian prince scam. You know, it's oh, hey, yeah, get millions of dollars, come sign up, you'll get a beautiful house and a yacht and all the women that you can want, and this, that, and the other. Brand new car of your choosing, and all you have to do is just give us your bank account information so we can wire you the money. And it's like, oh yeah, I'll just join the Illuminati and then get.
And when you look at the website, you have testimonials that supposedly
fake people saying that they but it's so obviously, like, you know, that's just the nature of the internet. But at the same time, it's like, if you're gullible enough to think that the Illuminati is this organization just willing to give away millions of dollars to anyone who sells their soul, and, you know, that they're pulling all the strings of everything, like, you're also the same type of person who would give up your account information to a scammer.
That's true.
So they know their audience.
One thing that you have been mentioning in your so far that I find interesting is that there is this connection between skeptic movement and I wouldn't say anti-religion, but this sentiment against religious dogma. Now, you are someone who grew up in a very fundamentalist background, in a very fundamentalist environment, and at some point you started questioning things. Now, you are necessarily not religious anymore. You were still religious, but you started questioning. Do you think this association between skeptic movements and atheist movements is something that could turn these people away?
I think it can. I think, though, at the same time, you know, I typically, and this is more the direction I've been going with my channel lately, is I try to start with skepticism.
Yeah. Because
I think that if you are not a skeptic, you're a bad atheist. You're an atheist for the wrong reason. If you don't actually, you know, leave your religion, if you were religious before, for reasons of, you know, it didn't match up to the data, it's, you know, not true, here's why, here's the evidence. If you simply leave your religion because, you know, oh man, like, they did some really bad things. Okay, there's a lot of people who've done bad things that are still saying something that's true. It doesn't invalidate the message. And so even if the Catholic Church goes around and systematically rapes children, that does not mean that the Catholic message is wrong. It just means that there's a bunch of horrible, evil hypocrites who are covering up the rape of children. Sorry if talking about that gets your video demonetized.
Oh, I'm not monetized yet. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I want to know what the truth is. Now, do I think that religion is harmful? Do I think that people use dogma, you know, and say, like, you can't, you know, don't doubt and take it on faith, and then also here's all this, you know, these harmful things that we're going to make you do or tell you to do. Like, yeah, I think it's extremely harmful, or it can be extremely harmful. And I also know you're run-of-the-mill, extremely just, you know, chill, relaxed, you know, liberal Episcopalians that are like, just go to church on Sundays and, you know, then watch football and have a pot roast. And I don't necessarily find them to be the biggest threat that humanity is facing. But for some reason, the Bible is not only encourages faith, but it's written, you know, in a way that you can very easily come away with the message that, you know, you should kill all gay people, that children basically don't deserve rights, women are property, slavery's okay. You know, like, these are things that it straight up says in the Bible, and if you actually believe that it's the literal word of God and you're supposed to take it on faith, you can come away with some extremely damaging, harmful messages. And I think that, you know, does that mean that the Bible's an immoral book? Yes. Does it mean that it's necessarily wrong? No. There could genuinely be this deity that's just a dick that is, you know, going around and he's like, ha ha ha, I just, like, want to see what happens when this guy picks up a stick on the Sabbath and he gets stoned to death. This is going to be so great. You know, that could be the case.
Yeah.
My goal is to figure out if it is, and am I pissing that God off, or is there another God? And maybe if I'm worshiping the Christian God, maybe I'm pissing that God off, or maybe there's no gods at all, or if there is a God, he appreciates actual doubt and critical inquiry, and he encourages people to find him through reason and science and skepticism, and to learn he's left clues.
Yeah.
I think if he's a benevolent God, it would be the last one. And if there's no God at all, what would we expect the universe to look like? And it's exactly what we find. So I want to teach people how to think critically and how to be skeptical and how to test the world and how to figure out, if there's actually something to the 6-day young earth creationist Genesis story, or if it's just as garbage as all the other religions, or maybe more. So, and I think when we teach people how to think skeptically first, we're equipping them with the tools to figure out if it's right or not. We teach them about logical fallacies. We teach them about cognitive biases and self-delusions. We teach them how easily our brains can be fooled. We teach them all of the ways that our brains can misfire, how we can, have things that we attribute to demons or spiritual experiences or something. But it's through the field of, more of like a neurotheology framework where we're studying what's actually going on in your brain that's making you think that you had this spiritual experience or out-of-body experience or possession, or it's like, oh, you just had a focal aware seizure. Oh, you just had, a flood of chemicals because you're currently taking drugs. Oh, you had sleep paralysis. Oh, you had, there's a million different things that we can account for these experiences that make perfect logical sense. And, if we teach people how to think and how to reason, and we teach them how the world works, and also teach them that just because you don't know how something works doesn't mean that it has to be magic or it has to be the supernatural or the paranormal, then they can start using like Occam's razor to try to figure out, okay, between these two propositions, which one is more likely. Okay, this one makes more assumptions, it puts forth more claims, unnecessarily complicates the equation by saying, for it to be true, this, and this, all these assumptions must also be true. This one doesn't really assume anything, or maybe there's one or two, small things that are in line with how the world works as we know it. Which one seems more likely? And when you really start to equip people with these ways of thinking and teach them how to reason and think logically, then I think even if they still come to the conclusion that they think that there was a first cause, or they're a pantheist, or they're a deist, or whatever, or maybe they're a super liberal, weird kind of Christian or Muslim or something, but the rest of it, they're like, oh, but I don't believe in the miracles. I don't, kind of like Thomas Jefferson cut out all the miracles and just had the stories of Jesus. He was like, yeah, it's kind of a cool book, but I don't actually believe this stuff. At least we're pushing we're pushing humanity more towards a reason-based, rational, more moral, scientific approach, and then we can start making more progress.
Because I really like your response, and what it seems to me is that instead of focusing so much on the anti-religion, on the atheist thing, we teach critical thinking, or we give tools to think skeptically, and then we let people decide for themselves whether they want to become atheists and reach that conclusion, or if they're going to have some form of deism or still be a Christian, but at the same time don't deny science, at the same time think critically. It doesn't have to be necessarily atheism.
Yeah. Now, I think that there are elements of, I change my mind on this topic. I like to think I change my mind on the topic purely because of reason. But I'm also aware that all humans make decisions emotionally, whether we realize it or not. We make a decision based off of emotion, and then we'll do this post hoc rationalization of, oh, look, I did, reasoning. And sometimes, we can try to train ourselves to be more rational, to be more logical, to take a step back, to try to distance ourselves from the pure emotional response that gets us into trouble. But I think that in order to open people up to be willing to get to that point, where they can try to detach their emotions and their personal, like, identity that is, like, when they've made a belief a part of their identity, like, when they've made it something that, like, they're afraid to let go because they'll have an identity crisis. Sometimes in order to get them to the point where they can make that separation and say, okay, here's me, here's my beliefs. They're not one and the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so then they can start looking at their beliefs and seeing if they're actually true. To get them to that point, I think sometimes it does require certain emotional triggers. It requires certain emotional things that they see and they're like, whoa, hang on, I never thought of that. That really rubs me the wrong way, or I have an issue with that. So in some cases, it's been people seeing, either imams or mullahs covering up child sex abuse by their, congregation or by their religious leaders, or with the Catholic Church or with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, every religion has done it to protect the faith. Yeah. Sometimes it's, like in my case, I was watching a debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye. Mm-hmm. And I had been told that, there's all these religious scientists who are young earth creationists, and they're so smart, and that, there's no real consensus, that there's just as many that are, in favor of religiosity. And I didn't really take the time to look through and actually see, okay, who are these people? What are their credentials? Why are they not taken seriously? How have they been dishonest in presenting their data and stuff, which many of them have been extremely dishonest. That's a whole nother topic and I've talked about it a little bit in some of my videos. But when I saw that debate, there was just one question where Tracy Moody submitted the question to both of them. It was, what, if anything, would it take to change your mind? Now, I had been told up until this point that the scientists just want to live a life of sin, they're in denial, they're promoting evolution in order to avoid accountability with God, mm-hmm. They're not honest actors. And what I saw instead was Bill Nye very genuinely saying, just one piece of evidence, like, that's how science works, that's what we're going for, I'd change it in a heartbeat, I would want to know the truth. Mm-hmm. And then Ken Ham's like, nothing's ever going to convince me that the Bible's not the perfect word of God. Yeah. And it was like, now, is it logical for me to see that and assume that every single Christian is not rational and reasonable, that all the Christian scientists are, just as closed-minded as Ken Ham? No, that's not a reasonable assumption for me to make. But in that moment, I did have this emotional response to, like, holy crap, I've been lied to and told that this massive characterization of the scientists is not what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. And this image and portrayal of the Christians are going where the evidence leads, and they're the ones that are, genuinely pursuing truth, it was the exact opposite. Yeah. It was so obviously, starkly the exact opposite, that in that moment I had been, I'd already been studying and researching to the point where I'd gone from young earth creationist to old earth creationist. I was, finding all these flaws in the Bible, mm-hmm. and then I saw that, and that was kind of my emotional, I'm done. I'm done with this kind of dishonesty. Yeah. And it was at that point I was really able to kind of expedite my journey into skepticism and critical thinking and science-based reasoning. Mm-hmm. So.
And now you are an atheist, but you can honestly say that if you were convinced of the opposite, if you were convinced that there is some form of deity, you would change your mind. If you were proven that you are, if you are convinced that you were wrong, if you have evidence or any form of argument that would convince you, you are always open to change your mind.
I'm very open now as to whether or not I would worship the deity. It would depend on if it deserves to be worshipped. Mm-hmm. What are the reasons for suffering in this world? Yeah. Why does this deity deserve to be worshipped? Mm-hmm. Is it fear-based and he's manipulating us with this, threat of hell? Then mm-hmm. I can't truly worship. I could say that I worship it in order to try to get out of hell and be like, you're so wonderful, you're so it's like a totalitarian authoritarian regime where you're doing it, you're paying lip service, but nobody actually feels like mm-hmm. And I mean there's exceptions. You look at North Korea where they're indoctrinated from a young age to have this emotional reaction where they see an image of him and they hear the national anthem and they just start weeping and feeling this oh, my leader and stuff. But if you're born not in a totalitarian regime and all of a sudden you're forced under it, You pay lip service in order to stay alive, but you hate the fucker every second of the way.
Yeah.
And so it would be the same with if I found out that, hey, here's this God who, to quote Stephen Fry, like, made bone cancer in children. It's like, what's that about? And yet you claim to be omnibenevolent. Those two, you can't square that circle.
Yeah.
So maybe he's distant, maybe he doesn't interact, maybe he's on, maybe he has no idea that we exist. Yeah. And he's so huge, and we're just like kind of a byproduct of some chemistry experiment that he has at in high school, whatever. And it's like Men in Black, where it zooms out at the very end. They're playing marbles. The aliens are playing marbles with the galaxies and stuff. Maybe it's that type of God. Maybe it's a deistic God who he kind of wound it up. And he's like, I'll just kind of see how it goes. I'll watch them from afar, but I'm not going to interact. Like, is that really a great, wonderful, benevolent, loving God? Is it, it's just kind of a creator, and it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. He made this, like, but I would want to know. I would want to know, and I'm not going to deny it if I think that there's genuine, actual evidence. The fact is, though, I don't think that there's good evidence to believe it. Like, I genuinely don't think that there's good evidence. I think that there's so much more evidence to the contrary. And whatever gaps we have in our understanding are rapidly being filled with science, and every gap that's been filled to date has been not God. So it's, if that trend continues, it's like... An example I like to give is the image of a puzzle, where as you're building a puzzle, when you first start out, you can just look at a bunch of pieces on the table, and you can say, I have no idea what that's a puzzle of. You don't have the box, you don't have the picture,
right.
You just see a bunch of pieces. Half of them are turned upside down, half of them are right side up. It's just a clump. You're like, it could be a dog, it could be a house, it could be anything. But as you start putting the pieces together, once you get, about halfway done or 3/4 of the way done, you start getting a really good idea what it's a picture of.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to come along and see a picture of, like, if the whole thing is just one giant picture of a car. If someone comes along and they see the picture of the car and there's a piece missing here, maybe a piece missing over here, a piece missing down here, and they come along and they take one look at it and they're like, come on, man, that's clearly a waterfall. It's like a red car. You're like, no, it's not. And they're like, oh yeah, no, it's a waterfall. You see, you're missing pieces. You have no idea. You're clueless. It's like, no. We're not clueless. We have 95% of the picture. It's a car. No, but you're missing that piece. You're taking it on faith. You scientists, you just take everything on faith too. It's like, no, we have a really good idea based off of all these pieces of evidence that are all locking in together. It's like, well, scientists have gotten stuff wrong. They've put the wrong piece in the wrong place before. They moved this piece up in the top corner and it actually belonged down in the bottom corner. It's like, yeah, and we used science to figure out and correct that mechanism, and now it's an even better picture, and it's not a waterfall. And people don't seem to get that. They don't seem to grasp that just because there may be a few things that we don't know yet, or just because there may be a few things that, like, we've learned and we've corrected and we've improved, we're getting a better and better and better picture, and every single thing points to this came about naturally. The universe is very old. What is it, 14.5 billion years old or something? And the Earth was not created in 6 days. Evolution is a fact. And this doesn't need God. This picture does not need God for it to happen.
And to remain in your analogy, if this religious person were to get to that picture, reorganizing in a way that everything fits and can make it a waterfall, then you might start questioning. Yeah, maybe we got it all wrong.
I might start questioning, but the fact is it doesn't. And
exactly.
The fact is that they might point to one or two things and be like, oh, hey, this looks like, an example they might give is they'll push it into the realm of, on the very, very edge, there's some things that, like, we don't know yet, like, oh, hey, why does quantum mechanics work the way that it does? Oh, scientists don't know, therefore God. It's like, now they're just plugging a gap with... there's no evidence that it's God. But they might say, we don't understand dark energy, so it must be God that's pushing it or something. And it's like, even if the best, like, actual, explanation for, the rate of expansion of the universe was God, then it still doesn't account for everything else that at least, especially the Christian God.
Yeah.
You know, the Christian, biblical, extremely human in its smallness. You know, everything that we know about how the universe works does not line up with the Christian model or the Muslim model or the Hindu model or the Buddhist model of the world. Nah, people are going to crucify me with a Buddhist comment, but because I realize that there's like secular variations of Buddhism, but specifically the kind of spiritual Book of the Dead.
Well, it's mostly the interventionist gods.
Yeah.
The interventionist gods is something that I completely reject as well, because you're gonna end up, if you believe in those, you're gonna end up relying on a God of the gaps argument, because we have science to explain already so many things, and it just doesn't really provide. For me, it just doesn't provide any explanation at all.
At the very best, what you end up with is a non-falsifiable God.
Yeah, exactly.
You end up with a non-interventionist, invisible, untasteable, unsmellable, detectable God that is. It's like the pink dragon in Carl Sagan's garage. Like, I have a dragon in my garage. All right, prove it. Let's go. Oh, you open it up, it's not there. Oh, well, it's an invisible dragon.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's sprinkle some flour around and see if it leaves footprints. Oh, it's hovering. Okay, well, let's look in like ultraviolet or infrared spectrum. Oh no, you can't see it. Oh well, how can we find this? How can we test it? Can we touch it? Can we? No, it's just it's some corporeal. Like you can put your hand like right through it, and it's like, well, then what's the difference between that and a non-existent one? If there's no way that it interacts in any way, shape, or form.
It's what I say about science. The beauty of it is that science can be proven wrong, and that's what gives us a little bit more guarantees that it might be right. While something that is unfalsifiable, it could be true. It could be true that the pink flying dragon is there, but you have absolutely no way to test that.
But here's the thing: most religious claims are actually falsifiable, and they've been falsified. So a great example of this is, with an interventionist God that says all you need is faith the size of a mustard seed, which basically means you don't need any faith at all. You just barely need enough to be like, God, will you do this for me? Like, I believe in you enough to like look really stupid asking the air. Wishing upon nothing, and if you have that much faith, you can cause a mountain to move from one side of the earth to the other. Okay, let's try that right now. Okay, God, I genuinely believe in you, and I pray that bridge will just pick up, do a full 360, and plant itself back down.
No.
I've got all night.
Nothing happened.
And like, I would do stuff when I was religious. I would ask for things. People have done prayer studies where they've done these massive studies, clinical trials, and it was a religious group. It was a religiously funded study. I think it was by the Templeton Foundation that does these types of studies. That I could be wrong on that, but I believe it was the Templeton Foundation that funded it. Now I'm second guessing myself, but either way, there have been massive prayer studies where they have placebo groups that didn't receive any prayer at all. Some received prayer and they knew they were being prayed for, and some received prayer and didn't know that they were being prayed for. And the ones that received prayer and knew they were being prayed for fared worse out of all of them, because there was kind of this stress and this obligation of like, I better get better quick because like I'm being prayed for and stuff. Whereas the ones who didn't receive prayer at all, like, they fared okay. Like, basically they recovered at the normal rates of medicine and stuff. But these are things that you would expect. Now, does that mean that they could have been praying to the wrong God? Okay, well, we can test the next God. We can go through thousands of them, one by one, and every single time I would expect the same result. Have they tested it for all the gods yet? Not at a clinical trial at that scale, but people have been trying this shit for centuries.
Well, there are some studies that show that people who have faith and pray during their recovery, during their treatment, do show some slight positive results, better results in compared to those who don't. But again, this is just
psychosomatically.
Exactly.
Psychosomatically, there's a reason
there
why.
Is an explanation
There's a reason why God doesn't heal amputees.
Yeah.
You will never see someone get their arm chopped off and they pray over it and it grows back. Yeah. It's always psychosomatic. It's spontaneous remission rates for cancer. Mm-hmm. Whether you pray for them or whether you don't, they're the same rate. And yet you have, people who your cancer went into spontaneous remission. The doctors can't explain it. And it's always the specific cancers that have spontaneous remission rates at all that happen to be the ones that are cured by prayer. Amazingly, miraculously. It's it's exactly the same explanation that we would expect if God didn't exist at all.
Exactly.
Or if I prayed to a jug of milk or a can of beans.
So, one last question, Thomas. Do you think that religion is our enemy? Is the enemy of critical thinking? Is the enemy of skepticism?
See, that gets kind of tricky because on the one hand, I do believe that faith-based religions are the enemy of science because the scientific method is not a faith-based method. It is a method of doubt. That is the whole premise of science, is to question and to doubt and to not take things dogmatically, to not take things on faith. Mm-hmm. This idea that doubt is a bad thing, that you have to just accept it, that is problematic. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to say, I have some, spiritual feeling and I close my eyes and meditate and I just feel one with the universe and it makes me feel happy inside and warm and fluffy or something, I don't necessarily see that as equally problematic. It might be based in some weird woo as soon as you start introducing the paranormal or the supernatural into it, in which case I have a problem with it. Yeah. Not because I think that it's necessarily as harmful as some religions, but I think that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far there's no evidence for that, the existence of anything supernatural, and there's a fair amount of evidence against it. And whatever supernatural even means, because if something interacts with the natural world, how is it outside the natural? But that said, religions that come along and say that this is the way that the universe works, or this is what you're supposed to do, and you have to take it on faith, you have to take it without questioning, I do see that as the enemy of science and skepticism. And I think that because science is the best tool that we have to figure out how the world works, it's the best way that we have to solve the biggest problems facing humanity, and it's, quite frankly, awesome. I'm going to continue to fight faith-based dogma wherever I see it. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I totally understand and share that feeling, and that's why I also have my own channel. And, thank you, Thomas. It's been amazing.
Cheers. Thank you so much. It's been a really fun conversation.
Thank you.